Okay, I'm trying to get myself set up here. Um, I'm trying to do a new podcast, and so why would somebody want to listen to me? Just another voice amongst how many different people out there trying to start podcasts and do all kinds of different stuff. I am trying to do something that I haven't seen too many people do. I'm trying to get into talking about a wide range of subjects and to a wide range of people, and not just people who agree with me, not just people who are like me. But anyways, I will get into that. So first of all, let me go through kind of who I am. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there because I actually don't really want this podcast to be so much about who I am and just what my ideas are, because we got so many people doing that. I want to more challenge beliefs. That's what this whole thing is going to be about, including my own. And I also want people to note that when I make observations about things like on how we could think differently or maybe how our mindset is wrong, it's not me like necessarily observing other people and making judgments on them as much as it is me noticing things about myself and then figuring out like, well, can I think about this differently, or am I thinking about this in the right way? And it's not so much trying to critique other people. Most of the time my observations come from how I work and how my brain works, and actually critiquing myself. So anyways, having said that, who am I? My name is Steve. I was actually born into an Amish family. My family left the Amish when I was very young. Just maybe 3 or 4 years old, somewhere in there when we left the Amish. We were kind of Mennonite up until I would say my very late preteens, like just before I turned 13. We were pretty much Mennonite, and grew up in the Northeast in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And obviously we were raised very religious, very conservative through that time. It was a time of where we were moving around a lot. My family, including my parents, were really trying to figure out who they were. I think at the time still trying to figure out exactly what they believed. But then it ultimately, my dad ended up having a construction accident where he got hurt really bad. And long story short, we ended up moving from Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, down to Tallahassee, Florida, the very northern part of Florida there. It's almost more associated with the Georgia lifestyle, I guess you could say, and culture. It was very much a culture shock. Through that time, we went from very religious to not really going to church at all, going from a very small country school to a city high school. It was a serious shift for me to do that. That was going from 8th grade into 9th grade, so going from junior high into high school and making that shift plus a complete culture shift. It was very big. And then also kind of our religious beliefs, just not really talking about it that much through that time, not really going to church or anything. Ended up getting tangled up in a lot of, I started smoking, drinking, doing drugs, all kinds of stuff through that time, through my high school years especially. Got wrapped up in a lot of bad stuff. Ultimately ended up joining the military shortly after 9/11/01, obviously, that whole September 11th thing, which I'm not going to hit on that a whole lot. Some of this I'm probably going to hit on at a later date. But anyways, I ended up going through 3 years of the military, going through a deployment, and then when I came back, ended up going from Fort Drum, New York, which is where I was stationed, down to Pennsylvania again. I was in a relationship there, ended up going through an extremely dark time in my life for the first 2 or 3 years after I got out of the military. Had a fiance that I broke up with. Ended up moving back down to Florida with my family. There, I, of course, felt like my life was just completely lost, essentially. It was still very tough going for me, and then obviously that's where I rededicated my life to God. By that time, my family had kind of started going back into Christianity and becoming very religious again. And that worked for me for a while until it didn't. Christianity, I'm not hating on anybody, but it just didn't work for me. It worked for a while until it didn't. And it, may have rescued me from that really horrible portion of my life, but then it just ended up not, in my opinion, being able to fulfill what I really needed as a human, as a person. It didn't end up fulfilling my deepest spiritual needs, and it really didn't end up fulfilling on the promises that I thought I should have as a believer, that I believe that it promised, its followers and everything. So anyways, that's also a different subject. Anyways, while I was still very religious, I met my wife now. We got married. She was kind of from our past. She also came from an Amish background. And I had known her when we were younger, had kind of lost touch for many years. But anyways, we ended up getting married. She was living in Ohio at the time. She came down to Florida with me. We ended up starting a life down there. Through that time, obviously, we were very religious, going to church, the whole 9 yards. We only lived down there for 2 more years after we were married, where we had our first child. And then we ended up coming up to Ohio. When we were up here, we ended up having a second child, which our son, they were 5 years apart. But through that time, things kind of started coming unglued for us. We were having problems. Religiously, spiritually speaking, they were having struggling really hard in that whole thing. And then financially, we were struggling. We were struggling in our marriage. I mean, just everything, we were just in really, really bad shape. And things just ended up kind of falling apart. We ended up, both of us kind of going through I don't know if you want to call it a spiritual crisis or emotional crisis, whatever you want to call it. Ended up going through a crisis of faith, I guess you could say. And those things ended up taking on a domino effect. I was in construction at the time, which is something that I had done my whole life. As if anybody knows about the Amish or the Anabaptist community, I started doing construction work when I was 14. I had been working on farms when I was younger than that. From the time I could carry a bucket or carry a hay bale, I was out there working on farms. But I was in construction at the time. I was actually self-employed, running my own remodeling business. And that was also getting to be too much because it was a stress of trying to run that, having a crisis of faith, trying to keep a marriage, being a father. It was all just way, way too much. It was another, coming from one very dark time, having it a little bit better for a while, right into another really, really difficult time. From there, I ended up kind of leaving the whole construction gig. It was still in, I ended up jumping into sales. But anyways, then we essentially went through that crisis of faith. And there were another series of events. This is really, really skipping over a lot, but we end up here where, I am kind of religiously unaffiliated. I am politically unaffiliated. This has obviously caused major ripples, among the community that I grew up with or that are very close to me. I don't mean like a whole community of people, but family and friends and that type of thing. It hasn't necessarily been easy in some of those regards. We've had our hiccups, obviously, because, when you're taught that everything depends on both of these and that even your religion dictates your political views, then, obviously, when you kind of start leaving those things, it obviously causes some issues. But anyways, obviously the whole religious and conservative political place that I came from heavily influenced my worldviews. I came, I was just a typical religious conservative guy, and had those typical beliefs, And obviously the two, religion and politics, were very closely meshed, actually so closely meshed. And I think it is for a lot of people, especially in America today, where you almost can't tell the two apart. Where if you lose one, you almost have to lose the other. When you question one, you kind of have to question the other. And it was, yeah, it was kind of in a really bad shape there when it came to my political and spiritual beliefs. Moving on from myself, I want to start talking a little bit about what I want the podcast to be and what I have envisioned for this whole thing. So my journey in the past, like 4 or 5 years since I started kind of coming out of my, questioning and everything of my religion and my politics and all that kind of stuff, that it kind of started about 4 or 5 years ago. This whole time it's been a journey of learning and discovery. After I got through the very dark, traumatizing parts, I guess, of that whole thing, it has been fun because my mind has been open to new things, and I've learned, rather than looking at questions like questioning my beliefs and challenging myself, rather than looking at those things as a difficult thing or something hard to do, I have actually learned to enjoy it, and I kind of enjoy it a lot because I consider it learning and discovery, almost like, you can discover new lands and everything in the physical. I kind of feel like you can do that in the emotional, the spiritual, societal realms of thinking and reasoning. I consider that a very much a fun part of my life, and it's a journey, and that's what I want to continue doing with this, because my mind has been stretched in so many different ways, and I want to continue that and kind of document it. And so what I want to do, I want to have open discussions. I want this to be an open discussion ground for people of all backgrounds, religions, nationalities, and different political views. I will obviously probably have people on here that we think very similarly, but then I also want to have people on here that I do not see eye to eye with, that I do not agree with, that I want to see what makes them tick, and also how it influences their worldviews and how they look at other people and the world, how it influences their politics, their view of society, and just on humans in general, because my view of humans, of who we are as humans, has really, really changed over the last couple of years, and I think it's been to the better. And how we view humanity directly influences what we're willing to do to get our way, and what pain and suffering we're willing to put other people through in order to do that. I want the walks of life to be varied from, people who, I might even stop and try to talk to somebody who's homeless on the streets. I might try to talk to other social media influencers. I want to interview those barely scraping by, who might be on government assistance, just trying to get food and pay their housing, to those who are successful business owners, who are making good money, who have made their way in this capitalist society, and who may agree with it or not agree with it. I mean, I want to get both sides of the spectrum on that. I want to interview people who are completely healthy, who have had relatively, what we would consider relatively easy life, even though I think that all of us have had our challenges. I don't know if anybody's had an easy life. And I also want to interview people who are dying, who are sick, who have lost people, and see how that shaped their lives. I've been listening to somebody who has a brain tumor, and their perspective on life has been heavily influenced after their diagnosis, and it causes some people to look at the world very differently. It kind of makes you reprioritize some things, and I want to take advantage of that and actually really, and just really want to dig into something like that. Our individual walks and situations here on this earth greatly influence how we see the world and other people. And I want to see how that impacts every individual person, because I think that two people can almost go through the same situation, but depending on how they look at it, it can greatly influence their outcomes. So, even if you go through a traumatic event, two different people can sit there and look at the same thing side by side, let's say in a foxhole, experiencing the same thing going on in front of them, and it hits one way different than the other, and it influences them, and they react to that in a completely different way. And then, a week, 2 weeks later, years later, something else can happen and once again affect them completely differently. It's obviously, when it comes to just our way of thinking, our way of life, it can affect how we look at economics, government, religion, and just all kinds of different things. And obviously, how you view these things ultimately, I think, comes down to how we view ourselves as a species. Who are we as human beings? So depending on how you view humanity will directly affect what policies that you will ultimately be promoting, which ones you will stand against, and it directly influences how we structure ourselves. How we view humanity directly dictates the amounts or the levels of injustices that we are willing to tolerate. If we allow politics and religion to just view humanity and tell us that we're all depraved, we're all fallen, we're all horrible, evil creatures, then we can very easily, in our mind, rationalize subjugating and harming and just overall treating other human beings in very horrible, horrible ways. If you allow religion and government and politics and stuff to tell you that, then you are going to be able to say, nationalism will tell you that you are exceptional because you were born in a certain country. And if you allow it to tell you that, then you are going to be willing to go and subjugate other people that are not born within your borders. Okay, you are going to be able to go do horrible things to other people so that you can have better prices at the pump, at the gas. Gas seems to be a huge thing in this country, and we're willing to do horrible, horrible things to other people in order to have cheaper prices at the gas pump. And that is because we believe that us as Americans, we are entitled. We believe that we should have things that other people don't. And you may disagree with that, and that's something we could talk about on here. And once again, that's the same thing with religion. This is not just Christianity. This is, you can have this in Hinduism, you can have it in Islam, you can have it in Judaism. Any of these major religions, I kind of look at the three Abrahamic religions as being the worst in this regard, that, it also teaches you that if you are born or you are within our borders of religion, you believe the way that we do, and you essentially prescribe to the same God as we do, then people outside of that, well, they're just kind of lost. So, you kind of look to yourself and to your religion as this kind of Noah's Ark, essentially, where you've shut yourself inside of it, weathering the storms of this world, and you're kind of willing to do whatever you have to do to preserve yourself and your religion, and that also means demonizing other people. And this is not any more evident than this whole conspiracy craze that we seem to be going through right now. I mean, we are just, oh my goodness. My world, where I come from, the whole conspiracy thing is just way out of control, and it completely runs on demonizing other people. Anybody who doesn't agree with you, different politics, everything, they're just portrayed as absolutely horrible, horrible people, and even demonic, demons themselves, that they're actually, some people actually literally believe that they're demons that are just look like humans. And it is, if religion and politics teaches us exceptionalism, then there really is no limit to the level of darkness that we're willing to sink to. There's really, it's a bottomless pit, to be honest. Also, once you start coming out of that mindset, and once you start looking at people not in a depraved way, when you don't have that nationalistic view of looking at yourself as an exceptional human because you live inside of the United States or within Christianity, you tend to take a look at things a little bit differently. And we're always intended, through the nationalism and religion, we always are taught to look at things in a black and white way. Take this side or I take the other side. It's always black and white. You're either on the right side or you're on the wrong side, and not to hit on the political button here or the latest and greatest thing, but a perfect example of this is what is going on right now in Ukraine and Russia. And we have been taught essentially that you need to take one side or the other. You're either on the Ukrainian side or you're on the Russian side. I don't want to touch on that too much. That's a crazy subject I might talk about a little bit later. But we believe that either one side or the other is completely justified in their actions, and we're just like, you need to go, you need to keep fighting this war, to further your cause, to further humanity, to liberate a certain people. But what we're kind of overlooking is that there's another side that you can take that seems to be a lot more wholesome, and that is simply the side of humanity. So us humans, we kind of tend to want to support things that we can whitewash. I think that if people actually saw and knew what was going on over there, that they wouldn't necessarily support one side or the other, that you wouldn't necessarily support Russia or Ukraine, because things over here are very whitewashed. Our media and our government, they don't want you to know, and I'm not trying to get into a conspiracy. I've heard, the media doesn't want you to know this, but if you think about this, if people actually knew that there were tens of thousands of people dying over there, that they're suffering like World War II losses, that this thing is a meat grinder. Like, they have probably, militarily and civilian-wise, when you add them together, probably already lost over 100,000 people in 7 to 8 months, whatever it's been. It is an absolute meat grinder. If people would actually see bodies beside the road and, decomposing corpses there, and with a dog chewing on it and eating a human being like it's a rotting groundhog beside the road, if people would see a basement where there were just way too many casualties, civilian and militarily, to do much with, and they just gathered up all the bodies and threw them in a basement. Now there's a 2-foot layer of human bodies across the basement of a house that's just laying there decomposing. And there are people that are going to have to go in there and deal with that at some point in time, by the way, and try to figure that whole thing out. But if people knew and saw those types of things going on, and if they were honestly seeing the millions and millions of people who are being affected by that war, they would maybe not support the United States sending billions of dollars worth of weapons over there, not because they don't support Ukraine or not because they're, a friend of Russia or whatever you want to say, but simply because you wouldn't support prolonging this war anymore. You would start trying to figure out, how can we be an advocate for peace, and how can we simply figure out how to end this war, because there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people dying. And if we continue to prolong it by, essentially the West fighting a war with Russia without really having to lose any of our own people, as long as we sit there and, justify the loss of tens of thousands of lives, and if we actually honestly believe that it's worth humanity losing all of those people there, These are, fathers, these are sons, these are daughters, these are wives, these are mothers, these are children, these are even grandparents. This is affecting everybody. Nobody is safe. There's been tons of children that have been killed. There have been tons of elderly that have been killed. There have been tons of civilians and tons of military. Russia will level a complete town and they don't really care who dies in it. But you know what? When Ukraine goes to take that town back over again, they kind of do the same thing. Regardless of who you believe is justified in that war, on what side of the conflict you're a part of there, they are both killing and being killed by the droves. And I think that if we would not just have our dualistic lenses on and believing that we need to support one side or the other, that one side is good, the other side is evil, you see that the people that are dying, even the soldiers in this fight, a lot of them are conscripts that never actually really had a very big choice. There's obviously a lot of volunteers, but there's also these, even if they're volunteers, probably really didn't have anything to do with deciding whether this war was started or not, regardless of what side they're on. And I know what it's like to be a 20-year-old in the military, and it's not right for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of these guys, even in the military, to die like this. It's really, really not worth it, in my opinion. And we've also, this is another thing that should open our eyes, is that we believe that atrocities were a thing of bygone days. World War II, we've made it beyond that point. However, these things are still in living memory of a lot of people alive today. There are still people who survived concentration camps of the Nazis. You still have Nazis who are alive that were in concentration camps running them and doing horrible things in there. We still have minorities in this country who literally remember the persecutions that they went through just simply because their skin color was a different color than ours. These are all things that we have whitewashed to such a degree, and we have painted it into the past, where we want to try to teach people that this stuff was a distant past, and it's not. These things literally have happened easily within the lifetime of people still alive today, who still vividly remember these things. But we have thought that we have kind of migrated out of those horrible, horrible times of history, and it's not true. The reason for it is because the systems and the structures and the governments and everything that were in place back then are still in place today. Systems are going to do what systems do. They have essentially, we have almost created a juggernaut, a life of it, something with a life of its own, an entity that has taken on a different life. We have kind of created these systems. You could, take some of them back thousands of years, and in America, hundreds of years ago, that we've created some systems that have almost detached themselves from us, that we've built them up in such a way that they kind of keep going perpetually, whether we are consciously keeping them going or not. They're kind of their own beast at this point, where even our economy and our foreign policies, and just our governmental national empire systems that humanity has put in place are things that have been going on for a very, very long time, and they've kind of taken on a life of their own. It doesn't matter who the president is, it doesn't matter who's in Congress, who's in the Senate, who your governor is, who your mayor is. It really doesn't matter, because these systems are going to keep on doing what systems do, and that is systematically chip away at the human species. And this is the reason why we also have billionaires who have a ridiculous amount of money, live in penthouses, have yachts, have private jets, never wanting for anything. And you could definitely argue that, hey, they deserve to have their money. That is a valid argument. But when you also look at humanity, you also wonder how this is possible, and they can literally drive past somebody on the street who doesn't have enough money to feed themselves, who doesn't have enough money for proper shelter, who lives under a bridge. How in the 21st century are we still fighting these major wars where tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying at a time? I mean, the United States in our 20-year war, we killed tons of people in the Middle East, y'all. I mean, America has killed, since World War II, I mean, we have killed a ton, many millions of people. We've killed millions of people. And you have, in the 21st century, you still have people who are starving to death, and you still have people who literally don't have drinking water, who don't have proper water to drink. You still have people dying of the most basic diseases just simply because they don't have the ability to practice proper hygiene, because they don't have clean water, they don't have soap, they don't have clean housing conditions, they don't have sanitary sewers, they don't have any of those things in place, and they're dying from them. And some people's minds right there would go, I don't know anybody in America who's doing that, and that kind of points something out there. And even in my mind there, it's like, well, I'm not just talking about America. We need to look outside of that, and we need to stop being so nationalistic and actually care about somebody in South America, like places here that you can literally get in your car and drive to. Don't even need to go on a ship or a plane. And then obviously those that are just across the ocean in like Africa and the Middle East, I mean, some of them have absolutely horrible living conditions. And obviously right now, even in Europe, in Ukraine and everything, there are people there that are suffering immensely. And I think what brings that one home, it's not that it's any worse than what has been done in other places, but it looks so much like us. These are white people, these are well-to-do people driving on nice roads in nice cars. You see nice neighborhoods, you see nice apartment buildings. You see places that look like us that are getting decimated, and people that are dying that look like us, that have the same demeanors, the same actions, that are dying by the tens of thousands over there right now. And once again, I want to talk about these things and what we as humanity could do to make these things better. What about, our religious beliefs, our economic beliefs, political beliefs, nationalistic beliefs, empire, colonialism. I want to talk about all of these things. I'm not just talking about, I don't want somebody to come in here and just simply say, oh, well, we need to go to socialism. Like, no, I want to talk about things that humanity has never done before. What are things that we have never tried before? Are there new ways? Like, when you go from one political system to another, or one economic system to another that's already been around for hundreds of years or thousands of years, then are you really doing anything? Are you just trying on something else that has failed already? I'm not just wanting to be like this progressive, that wears the the beanie cap only on the back of my head, sticking out at a 45-degree angle, with a man bun sitting around a fire, drinking kava and eating psychedelic mushrooms and stuff. Like, no, I want, and I'm not trying to hate on anybody on that. What I mean is that I don't want to be labeled as one specific person, because when I start talking about this, I know that people from my past and from where I come from, they're going to get a certain image in their head when you start talking challenging economic systems, when you start talking about the common good of people, when you start talking about questioning religion. And anytime you say anything about progress or progressive or evolution or anything like that, there's an immediate box that you get placed into. I'm not in that box, or at least I try not to be. Most of the time. So I want all of these things to be major subjects on this podcast. I want to talk about real shit. Like, I don't want this to be surface level conversations. It can be about anything ranging in there. It doesn't just have to be political. It doesn't just have to be about economics or spirituality or anything like that. It can be about a wide range of things. These are just the major examples that I'm bringing up right now because that's kind of what's in the forefront of my mind right now. That's kind of the struggles and the journeys that I've been on. I also want to talk about sexuality and people's orientation that way. I want to know. I would even like to talk to people who from across the world, not just here in America, but I want to try to get a hold of people in the Middle East. And I was always taught that they didn't like us because we were the white devil, but really what's going on there in their lives that I have absolutely no clue about. What influences their beliefs? It's hard enough for people in Ohio to understand people in California and vice versa, let alone somebody from Ohio knowing what somebody in Syria is thinking and believing, and what impacts their lives. How do they view the world on a day-to-day basis? These are all things that I am on a journey of discovery, trying to figure this stuff out, trying to listen to people, trying to educate myself, and just because I love hearing people's stories, I just want to hear this type of stuff. And hopefully through that journey, through these discussions, my worldview will get challenged, my beliefs will get challenged. Hopefully they will evolve and turn into something better. That's what a journey is all about. It's not about you're not on a journey if you're staying in the same place. Your views have to change, your beliefs have to change, you at least have to consider new things if you actually want to say you're on a journey. If you're closed-minded, if you've already made up your mind on what you believe and it's never going to change, then you can't be on a journey, because you have to be moving in order to be on a journey. There's something to be said about sitting still and enjoying the peace of the place that you're in right now. But if you want to be on a journey, at some point in time, you're going to have to start moving your feet again. And that's what I'm all about. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. If you're interested in anything like this, you can even get a hold of me. The name of this podcast, which I don't think that I mentioned, is Social Reformation. Don't run away from that either, because it may not be what you think. I don't want it to just be this progressive liberal channel where people think that this is all about progressivism and once again picturing me in a beanie on the back of my head. I keep going back to that, but really some of those things have merit. Anyways, so I don't want that to be pictured that way, but that I just want us to challenge and reform our society, because obviously it's not working. There's too many people struggling right now for it to be working. So anyways, I'm going to try to keep this short. Hopefully I'll have a lot of podcasts ranging from 30 minutes to an hour. I think it's going to be extremely hard keeping things under 30 minutes. I will do some by myself, try to keep those shorter, but interviews, they're probably easily going to stretch out into an hour. Anyways, I am going to leave this one here. This is just kind of an introduction, and I don't want to sit here and keep babbling and rambling on by myself. So have a good one. I hope to see you on the next one. Please, I would love to have a conversation with anybody who's willing to talk. So as long as you're able to have a conversation and you're not going to be so dogmatic, and if you're not going to sit there and just try to convert me and talk about mindless things because the Bible or the Quran or whatever says so, then yeah, let's have a conversation. Have a good one.